I'm going to read John chapter 14, verses 1 to 6. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. Well, in this series on questioning Christianity, we are raising some of the biggest objections and questions that people have about the Christian faith. And so today, what we want to do is look at this question of how can Christians say Jesus is the only way to God? I think that question or that objection could be probably summarized down to just one word, and that word would be exclusivity. Christians, when they say Jesus is the only way to God, what that brings up is questions and objections around that's so narrow, that is so exclusive. But I actually want to get a little bit more specific on our question than that, because as I interact with people, usually when people bring up this kind of a question, it comes in it's a whole bunch of different questions and tones that come in. Maybe you resonate with some of these. People may say something like, how could you possibly believe there is only one way? Or are you seriously saying Christians are right and everyone else is wrong? And you see kind of hidden underneath all this and in this tone and in these questions, there is the feeling that to believe that Jesus is the only way to God is an arrogant position to hold. To say that you have the truth and other people do not. And this kind of exclusivity leading to arrogance also leads to intolerance with those who maybe don't believe the same thing that you do. So the question really that I want to ask then this morning, to be a bit more specific, is how can Christians be so arrogant as to say that Jesus is the only way to God? I think a neat summary of our question comes from Oprah Winfrey on one of her shows. She said this, quote, "There are millions of ways to be a human being and many paths to what you call God. There couldn't possibly be just one way." Expresses it perfectly, I think. So let's tackle this morning's question in three parts. First of all, let's talk about the exclusive claim that Jesus makes. Then secondly, let's talk about the exclusive claims that we all make. And then finally, we'll talk about the exclusive claim that makes us humble. So first then, let's talk about the exclusive claim that Jesus makes. Now, in this first point, all I want to do is clarify for us what Jesus' claim is. So not saying necessarily that you have to agree. Regardless if you agree or disagree, let's just clarify and be sure on what Jesus is saying. Okay? Now, when people consider Jesus, I would say it's a general truism to say that people consider him to be quite a humble man. He is so tender. He's so approachable. The way he handles himself around people, he includes the outcasts of his society like the poor and the prostitutes. People, generally speaking, like Jesus. They might not like Christianity or the church, but generally speaking, they seem to like Jesus and agree he's a very humble man. That's why from Gandhi to Bono to Queen Elizabeth, Jesus is, generally speaking, revered and admired. Time magazine, of all things, stated that, quote, "the single most powerful figure, not merely in these 2 millenniums, but in all human history, has been Jesus of Nazareth." That's a pretty high view of Jesus. What is fascinating, though, as you read Jesus, is that he will not allow people simply to admire him or revere him. He always is pushing the envelope on how he thinks people should think of him. And nowhere maybe is this more clear than in our passage today. Look at verse 6 again with me at the claim that Jesus makes about himself. Look at verse 6. Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, I want you to notice two things carefully about Jesus' words here. First of all, notice that Jesus does not say, I have come to point out the way to God. Many people have claimed this. Muhammad claimed to be a prophet who pointed out the way to Allah. Buddha claimed this. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, he claimed to point out the way to God, or in Buddha's case, it's not like a literal God, but the kind of the real, the divine reality, whatever it's going to be. But Jesus does not simply say he came to point out the way to God. Notice, what does he say? I am the way. And in case we don't get it, he clarifies it again. No one comes to the Father except through me. So Jesus is saying then that just following certain teachings is not going to get you back to God. Following certain rules, praying, meditating, all those things may have their place, but Jesus says none of those things can get you back to God. He says, you must come through me if you want to come to God. Now, let's further clarify what Jesus is saying. As we continue this, notice in the second place, Jesus does not say, I am a way to God. He does not say, I am one way among many by which you may come to God the Father. That would actually still be a pretty massive claim, wouldn't it? I mean, if I said to you today, I may not be the way to God, but I am one way. If you want to come and know God, you've got to come through me. That's a pretty massive claim to make. Jesus does not just say that. He says, notice this again, verse 6, I am the way. That little word makes all the difference in the world. And again, in case we don't get it, look at this language. He says, no one, there's no room for anyone else under no one. There's not, no one comes to the Father except through me. You see, behind Jesus' claim right here is the entire Bible story. And the Bible story says that although God created us, we have all turned our backs on him, what the Bible calls sin. We have therefore created an insurmountable barrier between us and God. That barrier is our sin. So we cannot, the Bible says, get back to God. We can try and build ladders, the wall's too high. We can't get underneath it, we can't get around it. Our sin is an insurmountable barrier that cuts us off from God. But Jesus is claiming here that he alone can get us through the wall. He says, I am, if you want to put a gate on the wall, I'm the gate through the wall. Or if you want to say, Jesus gets rid of the wall, we could change the analogy. The Bible teaches that on the cross, Jesus paid for our sins. He took the punishment we deserve so that we don't have to, so that wall dissolves down. And Jesus is therefore the one who can usher us back into the presence of God. So, Jesus claimed to be the way because he alone, he says, can deal with our sin problem. I mean, think about this. If you said to Muhammad, I want you to forgive my sins, Muhammad would tear his robe and tear out his beard, and he would say, that is blasphemy. I cannot forgive your sins. He would never claim such a thing. But Jesus does. That's why one man writes this. If all we need is a teacher of enlightenment, the Buddha will do. If all we need is a collection of gods for every occasion and need and hope, Hinduism will do. If all we need is a tribal deity, any tribal deity will do. If all we need is a lawgiver, Moses will do. If all we need is a set of rules and a way of devotion, Muhammad or Joseph Smith will do. If all we need is inspiration and insight into the sovereign self, Oprah will do. But if we need a Savior, only Jesus will do. Now, of course, you'll recognize this right away, but people often use an analogy here. And they say that God is like the top of a mountain. And all the paths that lead up the mountain are like the world's religions and spiritual paths. But the point of the image, of course, is to say that in the end, all paths make it to the top of the mountain, to God, and therefore you cannot say there is only one path to the top. All paths lead to the top. But what if it's more like a maze than a mountain? What if humanity is lost in a giant maze? There are many paths to follow on a maze, but as this morning I was eating my cereal, my kid's Cheerios box was there and it had a maze on the back. There was only one way out. You can follow all kinds of paths, but there's only one way out. So don't misunderstand. Jesus is not saying that everything that a non-Christian believes is wrong. He's not saying that. He's not saying that everything in all world religions is totally false. What he is saying is that everything must be measured against himself and his claim. There are indeed many paths to walk in a maze, but Jesus is claiming that he is the way to get out of the maze and into the presence and the mansion that Jesus says he's gone to prepare for us in the Father's house. Now, all we've done so far then is to just clarify Jesus' exclusive claim. But of course, at the end of the day, this is precisely what people find to be so exclusive, to be arrogant, and what leads to intolerance with those who disagree. So now as we move to the second point, what I want to show you is that it's actually not, if you think about it, it's not as arrogant as you might think for Jesus to say he is the way to God. As we develop this, I want to show you that we all make exclusive claims that can lead to arrogance and intolerance. So here's the second thing we want to talk about. The exclusive claims that we all make. The exclusive claims that we all make. And here again, I want to deal with two things, two ways we make exclusive claims. First of all, we need to say that all world religions make exclusive claims. All world religions make exclusive claims. This might strike you as a bit odd because oftentimes as I talk with people, and even a conversation I had on the weekend, people will say, religion's great, but all religions are, at bottom, they're basically the same as each other. This is, of course, a very attractive idea because it says that everyone's views are equally valid, no one's really wrong, maybe no one's totally right, but we're all on the same page. So it's a very attractive and it sounds like a very tolerant idea. The problem, though, is that the religions themselves do not believe that they are the same as each other. They may be superficially the same, but they are fundamentally different. Let's just take the example of what or who is God or the divine or the supreme being. You see how many words I have to use just to even say that sentence? Because they differ from each other. What is this being called God? Every world religion agrees that the divine, let's just call it that, exists. But every world religion has very contradictory views on who or what the divine is. Views that cannot both be true at the same time. Let me put it like this. In Hinduism, for instance, the divine is impersonal, but can be approached through 330 million kind of subordinate gods who are represented by statues. You come to worship the statue and come through that god. In direct contradiction to this, Judaism says there is only one God, and this one God is a personal God, and this personal God absolutely forbids the use of statues in worship. These two things cannot both be true at the same time. There's either 330 million gods, or there's one God. He either likes being worshipped through statues, or he doesn't. It can't be both. In Christianity, for instance, Christians, of course, believe that Jesus is the eternal Son of God and should be worshipped as God. Muslims, on the other hand, emphatically deny that God has a son and emphatically deny that Jesus should be worshipped as God. In Buddhism and Hinduism, there is no forgiveness from the impersonal divine. There is only the ruthless law of karma, which says, of course, you sin, you pay. That's the way it works. Christianity, of course, says something totally opposite. It says there is forgiveness that's available in Jesus. Jesus says, you sin, I pay. The Indian-born writer Ravi Zacharias, he's kind of an expert on world religions, he states this: all religions are not the same. At the heart of every religion is an uncompromising commitment to a particular way of defining who God is or is not, and accordingly, of defining life's purpose. Anyone who claims that all religions are the same betrays not only an ignorance of religions, but also a caricatured view of even the best-known ones. And then he says, every religion at its core is exclusive. Might surprise you to hear this, but the Dalai Lama agrees with this as well. In his book, Kindness, Clarity, and Insight, he writes this: among spiritual faiths, there are many different philosophies, but some are just totally opposite to each other on certain points. So again, superficially the same, but fundamentally different. He then writes, Buddhists, of course he being the representative Buddhist, do not accept a creator. Christians base their philosophy on that theory. So again, he's pointing out, maybe superficially the same, fundamentally different. So you see, what I'm trying to say is it's not just Jesus who makes exclusive claims. Every religion does. In fact, we could say the only thing that all the religions really agree on is that they're different from each other. It may surprise you also then to hear a Christian pastor say this, but I would agree that any time you hold an exclusive position, it can easily lead to arrogance and to intolerance to those people who might disagree with you. I don't need to multiply examples for you. Just think ISIS, just think religious wars. There's no question about this. Religious people can very easily feel that because they are right, there are other people who are wrong, and those are the bad people, we're the good people, we're in with God, and so they can look down their noses at the bad non-religious people, or those who they call bad people because they don't worship God rightly. You follow? All world religions make exclusive claims. And so it is right here that most people on the west coast of British Columbia would say, that is precisely why I'm not religious. I just cannot accept how exclusive and arrogant it is to say that you are right and everybody else is wrong. And I think that helps us to understand why British Columbia actually ranks number 1 in Canada amongst people who would say they have no religion. But here's the thing. It's not just the world religions that make exclusive claims. In the second place, what I want to show you is all secular people also make exclusive claims. I'm using that word secular just to mean non-religious people. Now, at this point, here's the famous story that gets brought up. You'll recognize it right away. Bring up the story of the wise king and the elephant and the blind men. You know the story? So the king brings in this elephant, he brings in 3 blind men, and he says, touch the elephant, or he doesn't say the elephant, touch this, and tell me what it is that you're touching. And so, one of the blind men feels the trunk, and he's like, I think we're touching a tree. Another one's touching the tail, and he says, I'm pretty sure we're touching a rope. And of course, they're all wrong, because since they're blind, they have different explanations, but of course, the wise king can see the truth that what they're touching is the same elephant. Secular people then say that the blind men are the world religions, or spiritual paths, and the elephant is God. And the obvious point that's being made then is this: religious people, stop being so exclusive and acting like you know the truth. What you have is a piece of the truth. You may have the trunk, but that doesn't mean everybody else's views on the truth are wrong. You should not be so exclusive. You only have a part of the truth. Now, again, I think this sounds very attractive. It sounds very tolerant, but what I want to say to you right now is that many people fail to recognize how stunningly arrogant this illustration is. And here's why I say that. When a secular person uses that illustration, who are they claiming to be in the illustration? The wise king. So the illustration, it's already given it all away. It's given away that it's an elephant, but how do we know it's an elephant? Because somehow the secular person is saying, I am the all-wise king who can see what all the blind religious people cannot see. You see, the secular person is then setting themselves up to say, I am not bound to my culture and all of that. I can stand above everything else. I can look down at the world, and I can assess and see what all the religious people cannot see. You see the pride that's inherent in that? And so oftentimes then we find secular people, the easiest guy would probably be someone like Richard Dawkins, who absolutely looks down his nose, ridicules and mocks all the religious people because they're so unenlightened and they just don't get it like he does. It's fair to ask, however, who gave secular people such an enlightened viewpoint? Why should we assume that secular people can see the truth of religion better than the religious people themselves? Humility, I think, would require us to say that if we're going to use that illustration at all, we should all be the blind men, including the secular person. We're all the blind people trying to feel around about what we're experiencing in this place called earth. But let me just press this even a little bit further, because I don't think we usually think of secular people making really exclusive claims. We always think that about religious people. But let me press further on the secular one for a moment. I meet a lot of people who say something like, I don't believe in the gods of religion. I do, however, believe in a supreme being, but I just don't think that this God would judge people. I think this God is loving and certainly doesn't care who you sleep with and what you do with your life. As long as you don't murder people and stuff like that, this God doesn't care. But the obvious point, though, is that is a very exclusive claim about who and what God is like or not like. I mean, who are you to say that God is perfectly loving and would never judge anybody and doesn't care how we live our lives as far as we don't kill people? How do you know that? You see what I'm saying? You're also very, very exclusive because billions of people do believe that God will hold us accountable for how we live our lives. So this kind of view then is just simply another exclusive view of God along with the Hindu versions of God and what Christians say about God. It's just another one. Well, let's take it one last step further then. What then most West Coast people would say is, okay, well, what I'm really saying is I don't believe that there is such thing as absolute truth. I don't believe there is a one truth that all people must believe. I think people just free to believe whatever they want, and that's fine. That always sounds to me like the most inclusive and the most open and tolerant view there is. But I want to submit for your consideration that that statement may, amongst all the claims we've talked about this morning, it may be the most exclusive and the most narrow of all the exclusive claims. Here's why I say that. It's a very exclusive claim because the person is saying, the one thing that I know in all the universe is that there's no truth. Really? How do you know that? You're very wise to know that. It also is extremely exclusive because you're saying that anyone who believes there is such thing as a truth or the truth, all those people are wrong. So all the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, the Sikhs, they're all wrong, but you're right. You follow? And you're being very narrow because virtually everyone in the history of the world, including virtually most people on the planet today, do believe that truth exists. So what seems like supposed openness ends up being a very exclusive claim that is really only held by Caucasian Western people who like to be in university settings and talk about religions. It's very narrow to that. Go to Africa, they don't believe that. Go to India, they don't believe it. Go to the Middle East, they don't believe it. So it's a very narrow 21st century viewpoint. Here's what I'm trying to say with all this second point. All I'm trying to say is we are all exclusivists. Every single one of us. It is impossible not to be exclusive. Every single time you make a statement or make an assertion about how you think the world should be or what you think is right or what you think is wrong, every single time you do that, you are making an exclusive claim, and then by virtue of making that claim, you're saying the opposite is false. So we can't escape this. The follow-up is then to say that any exclusive claim can lead to arrogance and to intolerance. We already said that about religious people. They can look down their noses at all those, quote, bad, non-religious people. But secular people can do this too. Secular people take their own exclusive view, for instance, that you should never say that there's only one way. That would be one. That's a very exclusive claim. You shouldn't say that. That's wrong. And then they can look down their noses at anyone who says there is only one way. And I think increasingly in our culture today, we are seeing that secular people, in the name of tolerance, can act very intolerantly to those who are religious. So my whole point is simply to say we are all exclusivists, and we therefore are all prone to arrogance and to intolerance. So is there any way out? Is there any way to hold an exclusive claim and yet be humble and treat others with respect? Well, let's turn in the final place now to talk about the exclusive claim that makes us humble. In this third point, I want to show you that among all the exclusive claims of the world, Jesus' claim is unique, and that inherent within it is the power to smash pride, to build up humility, which treats others with respect. Okay, so I want you to consider Jesus' claim in this light. Let me develop it this way, though. First of all, let's talk about the exclusive claims of religion and spirituality again. The religion and spiritual claims, what they're going to do is come to you and say, you need to do meditation, or you need to pray, or you need to follow these certain rules, or whatever. There's all kinds of stuff there, right? Religion, therefore, says, I obey, therefore God accepts me. That's the basis of religion. I obey whatever the rules are, whatever you're supposed to do in it. I obey, therefore God accepts me. The trouble with this, though, is that it is all based on what you do. You can then easily feel like you're a good person in comparison to all the bad people who don't obey like you obey. You can then also feel superior to all those people who are not religious, and you can feel can have intolerance towards them. So pride is therefore inherent. It's at the core within religion, because religion is based on how well a person obeys. You see what I'm getting at? If it's all about me and how much I achieve, I can easily then look down, or I can boast in myself. I can look down on other people who don't do as well as me. All of that, it's inherent because it's all based on what I do. But it's the same kind of thing with secularism. It just changes a little bit. In secular thinking, there's no God to give you the rules, but people just make up their own rules or definitions of what is good. So secularism then says, I am a good person, therefore I am acceptable to myself, to society, and if they do believe in a supreme being, to the divine. But again, the trouble with this is that when you make up your own standards for what is good, you can make sure you attain your own standards, and you can justify yourself if you don't. And whatever the case, you are able to look down on those people who don't live up to your standards. So you can easily feel superior to all those bad people because, well, let's be honest. Have you ever met someone that says, I'm a bad person? Most people say, I am a good person. So they feel like they're achieving, and so therefore it can lead, I'm not saying it always does, but I'm saying it can lead towards an arrogance which then looks down on people who do not think the same way. Pride is inherent within secularism because it is also based on how good a person is. Now, this is where Jesus' claim is utterly unique. It's unique because, as we have seen, Jesus says you can't get to God on the basis of your own goodness or achievements. You can't get to Him. You have an insurmountable barrier. Put up a ladder as high as you want, you've still got 200 more feet of wall. You can't get over it. You can't get around it. You can't get under it. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book or something. There's no way to get over this wall and get back to God. Jesus' claim then becomes very unique because He says He can make us good enough. He says, if you come through me, I can make you good enough. Jesus lived the life we should have lived. He died the death we should have died. He says none of us are good, but He is good enough. He can introduce us to the Father. And so we say, Christianity says, because of what Jesus has done, I am accepted by God. You see, totally different than a religious model or a secular model. It's not based on what I do, it's based on what Jesus has done. Humility is therefore inherent. It's at the core of Christianity because it is not based on what we have done, but on the free gift of what Jesus has done for us. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that all Christians are humble people or that they never act intolerantly or anything like that. I'm not saying that. Christians can act arrogantly and they can act with intolerance. But what I am trying to say is it's not because they're taking Jesus too seriously. If they're acting arrogantly or intolerantly, the problem is they're not taking Jesus seriously enough. Because you see, when you see that I am not good enough, my pride gets smashed. Jesus says, you're not good enough to come to God. You have sinned. Your pride is smashed. But then Jesus says, I will get you to God. I will give you a gift. I will do for you what you cannot do for yourself. And he gives you this lavish gift, which is God himself. You're staggered by this. You're amazed by this. How then could I possibly think that I am better than anyone else? I can't, because I know I'm not better. I need God's gift of grace in Jesus to get to God, just like everyone else does. So I can't then say, I'm here and everyone else is here. I only get to God by the gift of God in Jesus. This then begins to root out the pride that's in our heart, and it begins to create a humility in us because all of life is based on grace. And when we get that, it changes how we treat other people. Because we no longer live in this constant world of comparisons where we have, those are the good people, these are the bad people. In Jesus' world, they're all bad, and they're all welcome to come back to God if they come through Jesus. And so when we get that, it changes how we treat other people. I think probably one of the best examples in literature and film is Victor Hugo's famous novel Les Miserables, or the recent movie that was made of it. Just remind you of that familiar scene that you probably know where Jean Valjean, the bitter and hardened ex-convict, steals some of the silver plates from the bishop who put him up for the night, kindly. And then, of course, he gets caught by the police and he comes back with the police and he just figures he's probably going to be consigned to prison for the rest of his days. But then in a great act of grace, an undeserved act, the bishop then says this in the novel. Ah, there you are, Valjean. I am glad to see you. But I gave you the candlesticks also, which are silver like the rest, and would bring 200 francs. Why did you not take them along with your plates? Jean Valjean opened his eyes and looked at the bishop with an expression which no human tongue could describe. The bishop, of course, then gives him the candlesticks, and once the police have gone, then he says this to him. Forget not. Never forget that you have promised me to use this silver to become an honest man. Jean Valjean, my brother, you belong no longer to evil but to good. It is your soul that I am buying for you. I withdraw it from dark thoughts and from the spirit of perdition, and I give it to God. And see, this single act of undeserved grace utterly transforms Valjean's life, doesn't it? I mean, he goes in, the proof is in the pudding, in the way he treats other people. Instead of this hardened convict criminal who's totally self-absorbed and only looks out for number one, he takes a little orphan girl and he raises her as his own daughter. He becomes the mayor of a town and ups the entire socioeconomic status of the town. And of course, in the end, he forgives the very man who seeks relentlessly to destroy his life. All because of that act of grace. He could no longer think of himself and be so self-centered. Grace had just stolen his heart. It had transformed him from within. That is the exclusive claim of Christ. No question, Jesus makes an exclusive claim. We can't get around that. It is a very exclusive claim. But what I'm asking you to consider this morning is that if you will accept Jesus' claim, it is unique in that inherent within it is the means to humility, is the means to treat others with respect even when they disagree with you, to make you into a loving and a gracious person like you want to be. See, if we think that Jesus' claim would lead us to arrogance and to intolerance, we have clearly misunderstood it. We clearly have not gone deep enough into his claim because Jesus, his whole life was about humility. I mean, here's a man that did not just teach about love, he showed it. He didn't just talk about serving. He was the one who bent down and took the place of a slave and washed his disciples' feet. And then, of course, he's not just the man who said, love and pray for your enemies, but he lived it when at the cross he prayed for the forgiveness of his enemies right as they were piercing his wrists and his feet with nails. That is why Jesus is the universally revered and admired man that he is. Because he lived, he practiced what he preached, and Jesus says, this is the kind of life I can give you. So what will you do with Jesus' claim? Jesus will not allow us to just admire him or revere him. He says, you must deal with my claim. I am saying, Jesus says, I alone can bring you to God. I alone am the way. I alone can deal with your sin problem. No one else can do that for you, but I can do it, and I'll do it willingly. I've died in your place. I can pay the penalty for sin. I can bring you back to God. So friends, what will you do with Jesus' exclusive claim? Let's pray.